Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, we're going to talk about trying to uncover and fix the root cause of your calf tears. Now, a lot of people will agree with me here, unfortunately. The calf tear is seen often as an old man's injury, or at least in Australia. One of the running jokes was that if you got to a certain age and you tore your calf, it was understandable. We sort of look at it as a thing that just happens as you get older, because a lot of older gentlemen, older ladies tend to tear calves more than the younger generations. But one of the things that I find really interesting about calf tears is we often neglect the root cause. And what's interesting about this conversation, and why I think it's really important to make a video on this, is that if you have one calf tear, we know that you are probably 4 to 6 times more likely to have another one, despite how strong you get, how loose you get. And I think it's really important to have this conversation because in traditional physical therapy, in medicine, we often miss the bigger picture. We're really good at rehabilitating your calf tear, getting it scanned, getting it strong, giving you calf stretches, all these sorts of things. But we don't necessarily do an amazing job yet of explaining to you why your calf tore and why it might keep tearing down the track, except for the stereotypical answers like age, bad luck, overuse, all those sorts of things. So hopefully by the end of today's video, you'll have a really good understanding about what some of the root causes of a calf tear is for anyone of any age, any profession, any activity, skill set you might have. There's generally two main things that set a calf muscle up to fail, and I want to cover those today and also show you a simple exercise for each that you can do to quickly and effectively sort of minimize the risk of that happening. So it'll make more sense as we go through the video, but the two things we'll touch on, the two main things, I want to make sure that you feel very confident that if you keep working hard on eliminating these things, that you can do what you want to do. Even if you have had multiple calf tears in the past, hopefully we can transition you from someone who has had multiple calf tears or a calf tear to someone who used to have calf troubles. And if it's hindering you doing what you want to do athletically, even if it's just stopping you taking your activity up a level, if you're someone who likes to walk but you want to run but you don't because you're scared your calves might tear, hopefully this video is just as much for you as it is for those people who are trying to get back to some elite activity. So let's get into it. So basically, as a physical therapist, I've treated a lot of injured calves in my time, and the two things that tend to define a lot of calf tears are ankle stiffness. So we're not talking about calf muscle tightness here per se. We're talking about an actual rusty ankle joint. So as a lot of people may know, most joints in the body are surrounded by what's called a capsule, which is a really tough, thick, soft tissue. It's called a capsule because it encapsulates the joint. So a really good example of this is with the shoulder joint. We have the ball and socket joint that sit together. If we were to wrap that up in a really thick plastic wrap, for example, that's what the capsule tends to be. And for a lot of us with the ankle joint capsule, they tend to get stiff. And if you've seen one of our previous videos that we published a little while ago, the main cause of ankle stiffness tends to be heeled shoes or thongs / flip-flops, depending on where in the world you're from, obviously. But just as a quick thing on that, I know I'm sort of going off on a tangent here, but we'll bring it back in a second. I always want to make this point really clear because it's really important to understand this. Any shoe that you have that has any heel at all, that translates to the exact amount of ankle range of motion you don't get a chance to use because it's being blocked by the heel. So if you consistently wear shoes that have any sized heel, they don't have to be the aggressive women's heels. It can be even just a kid's shoe that has a tiny thickness at the back compared to the front. That is the exact amount of ankle range that person doesn't get a chance to use while in the shoe. And if they're a pair of shoes that you wear a lot, then over time your body becomes stiff and it sort of stops granting you access to that range because you're not using it enough. And how that translates is that we often see that if your ankle is stiff, your ankle joint is stiff, it increases the amount of tension that goes through the calf, but it changes the way that you load the calf up. So instead of being a linear up and down motion, we start to see more oblique motion as your body has to try and work around that. And what we can hopefully see with this, hopefully I can show you this. So So what we see with a stiff ankle is that if you were to try and bend your ankle, say you're running and you're sort of bouncing in and out of this range, if you need more ankle range of motion than your ankle currently has, so let's just say that your ankle needs to bend enough to get your knee past this, but you only have enough ankle range to get to that point, then to make up the difference, your body can't go out because of the anatomy of the ankle, but it often dumps inwards and goes past that. So how that looks here is instead of going consistently out in sort of out in front of you in a linear sense, it runs into that stiffness and it has to deviate to go around that. And as you can hopefully see here, it closes down my hip, puts your knee in an awkward position, and it closes down your ankle as well. And if you were to look at my calf muscles and my Achilles tendons here, as soon as those knees dump inwards, the calf muscles go from being loaded in a more linear sort of upright motion to a more oblique position. And not only because those ankles can't absorb shock as well, because you don't have the give to do that, it can create some extra tightness through those calves. So if you're someone who's forever stretching your calf muscles and they're consistently getting tight again, and it's just this constant cycle of stretching, tightening, what that generally tells us is there may be some ankle stiffness underneath that you haven't addressed because you're not aware of it, because who would be? It doesn't hurt. It often doesn't feel tight. It just stops moving. So, and it can be asking those calf muscles to keep tightening up to compensate. So again, one of the main causes of calf tears that we see, calf muscle tears, are the calf muscle having to buffer a stiff ankle. So that's number one. So what we want to do here to try and solve this, we can do a really good job with what's called a power band. So you can do the same thing with the inner tube of a bike tire. You can use TheraBands. You can use anything that's sort of strong and robust, but also has a little bit of give in it. And again, we've been through this before a few times on the channel, but the ankle stretch itself. So again, this is more so for people who are sort of just past that acute stage, just in case this doesn't injure your calf or make your calf feel sore. Again, it's not your traditional calf stretch, but just as a warning, make sure that you do this. It should never hurt your calf. We're not trying to stretch your calf. We're trying to decrease the stiffness in your ankle. So the band goes just above the ankle joints. You want to step out away from that, leaving this ankle behind. And again, what we don't want here is we don't want you to drop down into a squat and have to use your thigh muscles. We want to take your hips past your foot and then bend that back ankle and maybe the back knee a little bit, so that you feel some resistance and some tension at the back of the ankle. And all we want you to do here is hang out. So hang out at the end of your range for a minute, 2 minutes. You can oscillate in and out of that if you want to. But to look at this from the front, and we do this every time, but the key here is that we know that if you run into some ankle stiffness, the knee's going to want to dump in. So a lot of people who have stiff ankles are trying to stretch themselves in this position, whereas we actually want you to try and stretch yourself in a externally rotated position. So you want to rotate that knee out as far as you can without your foot coming off the ground, without your big toe lifting. So we don't want to be in this position. We want to be out as far as you feel comfortable. And if your ankle's stiff, it may only be here, but we want you at your limits in both directions. We want your rotational limits and your forward limits as well. So those forward limits as well as the rotational limit, just so we're clearing up as much of this ankle stiffness as possible. So again, if you've seen that exercise before, you'll know this, but we want to make sure that you can spend a minute or two, you can obsess over that, do it as much or as little as you can so that you see a genuine change in your flexibility. So the best thing about using a band and getting at the joint itself is if you've done anything, you'll immediately walk away feeling like that part of your body is looser. It'll feel lighter, it shouldn't feel sore at all. And again, if your calf is in that acutely irritated or injured state, then just be very careful how quickly you do this, just in case. But as soon as you feel like you're past that painful stage, or you can find a position that doesn't annoy your calf and just hits your ankle, this will help speed up your recovery long term. And then if you can hammer that over the course of weeks, there afterwards, and really reclaim some of that ankle mobility, then obviously the chances that your ankle is going to tear, your calf is going to tear again, is going to lower because the mechanics are better. You're loading up that calf muscle better than you were before, even though you weren't necessarily aware of that, most likely. So that's number one. So the first most important thing in terms of the root cause of calf tears is ankle stiffness. And you can clear that up really well with the power band, as I said, obsess over it. Number two, the second most common root cause of a calf issue. And this one often surprises a lot of people because it often doesn't feel like it's connected, but clinically it is very much so. And what that is lower back dysfunction. Now, again, when we're looking at the calf muscle, the calf's almost the furthest structure away from the back. So a lot of people are a bit skeptical and say, well, look, it's so far away, you know, how is it connected? Well, obviously it's physically connected through all the anatomy, but the most direct connection between the lower back and the calf is the sciatic nerve. And the sciatic nerve is the nerve that controls and supplies the calf muscle, but physically it runs straight down the back of the calf. Now, it's not necessarily the sciatic nerve by the time it gets here, as it branches off into two different nerves, but the basis of this is that the nerve that runs down through the center of that calf originates in its original form at the base of that lower back. So if you are someone who doesn't have lower back pain, it doesn't matter because we're looking for mechanical stiffness and restriction. So similar to the ankle, if your ankle is stiff, it doesn't necessarily tell you that it's stiff. It just tries to find a way around it. It doesn't have a tight or pulling quality like a tight muscle does. It doesn't necessarily have a weakness attached to it like a weaker muscle does. So it's a lot more of a covert dysfunction. It's the same thing with your back. It doesn't have to hurt, but we want to go looking for stiffness and tightness to unglue the nerve, take the kink out of the hose to allow normal function to occur. So again, if you've got this restriction in your spine, pulling a lot of the slack out of that nerve, that decreased neural tension, again, can cause some dysfunction all the way down through anything that it associates with. And again, we've done a video on this before, but it's one of the reasons why hamstrings are so commonly injured is because of back dysfunction. It's the same conversation with the calf. It's just down a foot, basically, or whatever that is. So, but the point I want to make here is if you're not looking at your lower back in terms of stiffness and tightness, and also stability and core strength and those sorts of things go hand in hand. But for the purposes of this video, we want to locate and clear up that stiffness. And again, if you follow the channel, you'll know how important a ball is in discovering your dysfunction. It is one of the best tools that I've ever seen. It's very, very effective, very fast acting. So what we want to do is we want to place the ball in your back, right in the middle of the spine where the bumps are, but we want to let the ball just roll off to the side onto the column where some of the muscles are. Now, we're not interested as much in the muscles, but we want to sink through some of those muscles and get a sense of what the joints are doing in the back. So how that looks is you want to place the ball in the back, right in the middle, just let it come off to one side, and then we're going to lie down on this. Now, you can do this standing up against the wall if it suits you best, particularly if you're not someone who likes getting down on and off the ground comfortably. But so I've basically got the ball in the middle. I've just rolled it off to my left-hand side here, and I don't want to roll up and down because the joints are very specific, very segmentalized, if that's a word. So the bottom line is we want to keep that constant pressure on it. So if we go right down to the base, just above the sacrum, just in between the bumps of those hips, we want to go looking for something that feels stiff and tight. And again, it's okay if it's not tender or sore. We're looking for resistance and toughness. And if you're not sure what that feels like, just compare the exact same spot on the other side. So I've moved it across to this side now. So for me, this side actually feels a little bit slightly more tender, but it feels like the ball sinks in a lot easier. When I come back to this side, again, right up next to the spine, it feels like it doesn't sink in as well. So this, for me, is a stiffer area. So I need to spend some time just lying here, letting the ball press in, trying to free those joints up, de-stiffen those tissues. Once I've had enough, then I just want to move the ball up a little bit and continue the same process. Compare sides, free it up, move it up to the next one. Just keep going up as high as you feel like you need to go to clear some of that dysfunction. Now, just as a quick tip with that, often the stiffness tends to be on the same side. So it doesn't go from L4 to L5, L3, L2, L1 and chopping and changing sides. It's generally up one side, and then if it does change, it then keeps going up on that side because it's often a consequence of our postural habits. We're not sort of twisted segmentally in different directions. It's more of a broader twist or a broader asymmetry. So we can use a ball to locate some of that stiffness, spend a whole bunch of time on those areas, watch some TV, read a book, use your phone, do whatever you need to do, but make no mistake, trying to free up those sections of your back can do wonders to feed a lot of normal function back into your calf muscle. So I just wanted to make sure that those 2 points were really clear because You still need to get your calf muscles strong, doing calf raises. When the tissue is healed and it's no longer injured, calf stretching, soleus and gastroc stretching are really important. But if you're not sort of pairing that up with some of the broader mechanical things in terms of de-stiffening your ankle and de-stiffening your lower back, then potentially we're missing the point of why that happened to you in the first place. And you can keep getting stronger and keep massaging those calves, getting them looser with stretching, but you're only necessarily creating a bigger buffer against the less than perfect underlying mechanics. But if you can address those things, then obviously you're just going to go from strength to strength. You're not going to have this handbrake or this sort of anchor holding you back, setting you up to fail or setting you up for the potential of failure consistently. We can sort of take those handbrakes off, restore normal functions of the calf, and then hopefully significantly decrease the risk of those calf muscles injuring again. So let me know how you go. As always, please let me know in the comments below. If you have a calf injury, if you're having multiple calf tears, tell me. Let me know how you're going. Let me know if you found these little tidbits of physical therapy information useful. For some reason, it's not as widely known as it could be. So I wouldn't be surprised if you haven't had your ankle joint mobilized or you haven't had your back looked at if you've had those multiple calf issues. So hopefully at the very least, this video gives you the confidence to go after those things and make some changes yourself and hopefully see the benefits of that. But again, let me know in the comments below. If you did find this information useful, please consider leaving a like below. And if you are new and you enjoy this type of content, please let us know. And if you could consider subscribing, that would also help. Obviously, that interaction really helps these videos meet more people. It helps get the word out a lot more. It's really useful information that we go through clinically every day that has some fantastic results. And again, it's not fancy. It's not, we're not guessing here. It's just based on what works. So, if a patient comes in to see me and they get that information, there's every chance that there's 20 to 30 times more people looking for that information and just not finding it. So any help you can give us supporting the channel would be great. But with that being said, thanks for joining in. Hopefully that helps, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.